Here we are at the Ryan Rare Books Room at the School of Architecture at the University of Notre Dame. A lot of the images that you've seen in the various videos that we've shown you about Rome have actually been based on the imagery that we have here in the Ryan Rare Books Room, from the books collections, from maps that we have here. And those images have really enriched our understanding of Rome because they've shown us a Rome that in some cases no longer exists, parts of the city that have been transformed, especially in the late 19th and early 20th century. A lot of what we know about those parts of the city we know from books. And we're going to look at some of those again here today in the library to kind of remind us a little bit about what one needs to do in order to recover the way in which people once thought about cities and how to learn about cities really today in whatever place you are and wherever you're coming from. That's been one of the great things about the course for me, is hearing from everyone in the discussion forum about where you're coming from and the cities that matter to you. And I've learned a lot, actually, about the cities that everyone seems to be coming from around the world. Some cases rich with history, some cases quite new. But in lots of cases, everyone seems to have a deep appreciation and love for their home. And I think that's a natural human desire and experience, to really love the place that you're from and want to value it and hopefully also know about it. So lots of folks have done research on their hometowns. And again, I've learned about that, whether it's Jiading in China or Damascus in Syria. We've learned a lot about the history of those places and how they've changed over time. And I think that active engagement with where you're from, knowing something about where you're from, is really essential to becoming a kind of an active participant in that place, and somebody who's maybe going to influence what that city will become in the future. So I've learned a lot from you about where you're all from. And I've also learned a lot in preparing the course, because in order to explain Rome to a very wide audience around the world, really, I've had to think through what it is that I know about Rome and how I could present it to you in the clearest way possible. And in doing that, actually, I've discovered some new things. I think the reading that I have of the Campidoglio, for example, and Michelangelo using perhaps Vitruvius' description of his basilica at Fano, that particular interpretation and the animation that we produced of that is really a kind of a new contribution to knowledge. So that's something that I learned a lot about in preparing for the course. I've had to think through things, figure out how to explain them, and in doing that, I've learned some new things that I'd never quite realized before, and hopefully, therefore, you've learned some new things. And that's also, I think, a kind of an aspect of what the course is meant to suggest, is that, you know, this kind of active engagement with your own history and past sometimes opens up new readings and possibilities. And that sense in which you're constantly alive to the possibilities, but also sort of invested enough to do research, is, I think, a really, again, essential aspect of knowing where you're from and feeling responsible for it. Piranesi, the great engraver, etcher of the 18th century, again, from whom we've had a few images in the course, was described by one of his biographers as, in his early years in Rome, constantly running between libraries and ruins and libraries. So he was looking up drawings of ancient buildings in books and what people knew about them historically. He was then going to check on the actual ruins themselves to see if they matched what the library said, and then he would run back to the library with his knowledge about the ruins and check on the books. And that constant kind of exchange between research and experience is, again, I think, an essential part of understanding cities. A lot of times we experience cities as tourists, and we're kind of passive as we visit them. We wander around, we have chance experiences, and that's an essential aspect of cities and our appreciation of them, really feeling them and knowing what it's like to be there as a resident, sometimes even imagining that you might actually live there if it's a place you've never been before. But in order to really know it, you have to dig a little bit. And there is lots of information around about the history of cities. And so I'd always encourage you, when you're visiting a new place, to try to learn something about its history, try to imagine how it grew and changed over time. And some of that, I hope you've realized you can get just from looking at maps. The ways in which I, in the introduction to the course, explained how you can read the map of Florence is really kind of a metaphor for the kind of experiences you can have in cities all over the world. And you can sort of, in a way, kind of imagine the history of a city based on how the map seems to suggest the city was founded and how it might have grown and changed over time.